The dawn broke cold and unforgiving over the valley, with the wind slicing through like a blade, carrying the stench of dried blood and bitter regret. Elias Ward's hand tightened around the reins as his silver-gray eyes squinted against the rising light, slowly revealing the silhouette of his inherited cabin. But what he saw froze him dead in his tracks. 5 women, suspended from ropes like ghostly warnings, swaying gently in the morning breeze. Their tattered dresses fluttered like flags of surrender, tangled hair obscuring their faces, while their bare feet swung in mournful rhythm. Pierced into each chest was a crude, wooden sign, scorched into the grain with a knife. Words that burned into his mind as surely as they had into the wood. This ain't your land. What belongs to Morrison will always belong to Morrison. Elias's grip on the reins grew tighter. His throat suddenly parched, as if the very air had turned to dust. This land, left to him by Uncle Jeremiah, was supposed to be his salvation, a fresh start after years soaked in war's blood. But what greeted him was a nightmare carved in flesh and timber. The sight of those lifeless bodies hung like a savage punch to the gut. His horse snorted loudly, restless and agitated, sensing the darkness in the air. Elias swung down from the saddle, each heavy step crunching on the frozen earth, boots thudding with the weight of dread. His calloused hand trembled as it reached for the neck of the nearest woman. A faint pulse fluttered beneath his fingertips, then another. Breath still lingered in the cold wind, faint but real. A spark ignited deep within Elias's chest. This was no longer just about inheritance. It was a brutal challenge issued from a shadowy force determined to claim this land by blood and terror. Cutting those ropes was a defiant act, but it meant stepping into a maelstrom that could swallow him whole. Storm clouds gathering on the horizon, ready to burst and drown everything in chaos, even if it cost him his life. Thank you for sharing this story with me tonight. Wherever you are tuning in from, I hope you're safe. May happiness find its way to you, even in the darkest of times. The blade in Elias's hand gleamed cold and deadly as he sliced through the first rope. The woman's limp body tumbled downward, but Elias caught her just in time, his arms steady despite the trembling in his grip. Her neck bore the angry red mark of the noose, her breath faint but persistent, refusing to surrender. Without hesitation, he moved to the next, then the next, meticulously working to free them all. 5 bodies, sprawled in a ragged line before the cabin gate. Kumph. Frozen from the night's cruel chill, their eyelids fluttering weakly, caught between pain and unconsciousness. He flipped his knife, hands trembling as he sliced the bindings on their wrists and ankles, revealing battered flesh marred with bruises, criss-crossed lash marks like a cruel verdict etched into skin. Whoever had done this meant for them to suffer slow and agonizing death, to serve as a warning carved into their very bones. The brutality screamed of a force that thrived on terror, on making sure no outsider dared step foot on this cursed land without paying the price. Elias dragged each woman beneath the cabin's front awning, the darkness inside thick as morning fog, heavy with dust and despair. There was just enough room for 5 broken bodies to lie down, their silence a haunting testament to the violence that had been wrought here. An ominous message from the shadows that still lurked in the frontier's depths. Elias sparked a fire that cast flickering shadows across a grim tableau. 5 figures laid out in the glow of dying embers, their faces haunted by the darkness of the night. The flames danced, revealing a tapestry of suffering and defiance etched into every line. First, a woman with jet-black hair and piercing eyes, her face marred by a cruel gash that told of a fight fought to the bitter end. her spirit unbroken even in delirium. Next, crimson hair tangled with dirt, cracked lips whispering silent screams of rage and pain. Yet her posture refused to bow, standing tall against the shadows. The third figure, slender and serene, golden hair catching the firelight, bore a face that still held a fragile grace, even as exhaustion dragged her down. Dark eyes, as deep and cold as midnight, half-lidded and calculating, lurked behind a veil of mystery, watchful, waiting. The last, an older woman with chestnut hair, radiated calm, like a mother's quiet shield, silently guarding her trembling charges. Elias didn't need to ask. Their wounds and worn expressions told him they hadn't been cast aside by chance. No, someone had chosen them, deliberately, and wanted him to understand that, loud and clear. Outside, the wind howled like a beast in the night, carrying the bitter scent of rope and the lingering tang of gunpowder, reminders of what had transpired. Elias sat with his back pressed against the rough wood of the cabin door, his Winchester resting across his lap, the firelight flickering in his weathered eyes. Those silver orbs, hardened by wars he thought he'd buried long ago, flickered with memories of nights when blood was spilled for reasons no longer clear. But the West never grants peace so freely. Uncle Jeremiah's words echoed in his mind. Land isn't just bought with silver. It's held with blood. Now, that truth stared him in the face, embodied in 5 trembling souls sprawled before him. In the still silence, Elias understood. There was no turning back. Saving them meant facing the kind of men who could hang women like banners from a gallows, their faces cold and ruthless. Turning away, though, would strip him of his manhood, leaving only hollow shadows behind. A sudden cough shattered the quiet, ragged, desperate. The black-haired woman's eyes fluttered open first, flickering like dying flames in the darkness. Her neck bore a deep crimson bruise, her voice raw and broken, yet it cut through the night with an iron command. Don't leave us behind. Elias knelt beside her, gently offering water from his battered canteen, pouring it into her cracked lips. She drank greedily, as if swallowing hope itself, each sip a defiance against despair. When her breathing steadied, she sat upright, her gaze sharp as a blade slicing through his soul. "Do you realize you're walking straight into a storm?" she whispered, her voice a threat and a plea. Before Elias could muster a reply, more groans and murmurs rippled through the cabin. The red-haired woman pushed herself upright, fury igniting her piercing blue eyes. The blonde woman stirred, exhausted but clutching Elias's shirt like a lifeline. Her trembling fingers desperate for something, anything to hold on to amid the chaos. The older woman moved with quiet purpose, helping each of them to sit, her steady presence a silent anchor amid the wreckage. Elias sensed, without a doubt, that she had been the one holding them together through hell's darkest hours. The cabin filled with ragged breaths and the soft crackle of dying firelight. Elias poured more water, shared dry scraps of bread, though words were scarce. Their eyes, full of wariness and unspoken questions, held a silent conversation. Trust, suspicion, a test of their fragile hope. At last, the brown-haired woman broke the silence, her voice low, steady and unwavering, speaking for them all. But Elias knew this was only the beginning. That noose swinging at the gate wasn't just a warning. It was a message carved in blood from the man who now rules this town. His message. Anyone foolish enough to step foot here will pay the price in blood and bone. Elias clenched his fists so tight, His knuckles turned ghostly pale, rage simmering just beneath the surface. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it spoken aloud ignited a fire that threatened to consume him. The fiery redhead let out a bitter, cutting laugh, fury and warning woven into every note. "If you've got any sense, you'll turn that horse around and ride as far from here as your legs will carry you. We're already dead. But if you choose to take us in, you'll die with us." Elias lifted his gaze, his steel-gray eyes piercing each of their faces, voice low, steady, unyielding. "I cut those ropes. From this moment on, your fate is mine too." In the flickering firelight, the woman with midnight hair pushed herself upright, her lips curling into a tired yet defiant smile. Then she spoke, voice sharp as a gunshot in the dark. "Listen closely, landowner. You didn't just inherit a cabin. You've inherited a war." Her words hit the air like bullets, each one a warning that peace was a ghost now lost to them. Elias understood then, with brutal clarity. What lay ahead wasn't about grazing cattle or tending crops. It was blood, shadows closing in, and a battle that would test every ounce of their courage. That night, the hearth's fire flickered wildly, casting ghostly shadows across faces marked by hardship, scars, and survival. Water and makeshift bandages were passed around as the women, still weak but eyes burning with a fierce, unbreakable fire, began to gather. They'd walked through hell and come out the other side, scarred, yes, but unbroken. Grace, the eldest, was the first to speak. Her voice was steady, deep, each word carved from the marrow of her bones. "The man who hung us at that gate, his name's Morrison, respected judge in town. But behind that black robe, he's a trafficker, a dealer in flesh, a forger of papers, a man who turns women into property. We fought back, and this is the price we paid." Elias's jaw clenched tight, veins standing out like ropes across his neck. Morrison's name carried the weight of old war stories, an echo of death wrapped in a man's skin. Ruby, the fiery redhead, sat up straight, eyes blazing with rage. "He burned my home to the ground. Then he tried to make me sign my life away in debt. I refused. That night, they took me, dragging me away while my little sister screamed. I swear I'll see him bleed." Her voice trembled with fury and grief, a promise etched into every word. Sadi, the quiet blonde, clutched a worn scarf trembling in her hands, voice barely above a whisper. "All I ever wanted was a peaceful life on our little farm. But he accused my father of horse theft, then used me as collateral. My father hanged himself the very next day. I've got nowhere left to run." Violet, the youngest, sat in silence, her eyes dark pools in the firelight. She lowered a small leather pouch to the floor. Inside, forged papers, land deeds, seals, contracts, maps, proof of their suffering. "We don't just wear scars," she whispered. "We carry proof. Morrison thought hanging us would bury everything. But as you can see, we're still breathing, and we're coming for what's ours." The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the wind howling through cracks in the old walls. Elias looked at each face, each one a testament to resilience, defiance, and the unbreakable will to survive. The night's shadows stretched long and dark, and the question hung heavy in the air. How far would they go to see justice done? The dawn broke over the valley like a blade slicing through the dark, heavy fog that clung to the land. Elias sat motionless on the weathered porch steps, cradling a steaming mug of coffee, the cold steel of his Winchester resting beside him. Every breath from inside the cabin was a whisper. Every faint shuffle of the women who had just escaped the hangman's noose echoed in the stillness. But peace is a fragile thing on the frontier, and it shatters faster than glass when danger rides in on pounding hooves. Suddenly, the distant thunder of hooves shattered the morning silence. At first scattered, then gathering with relentless fury, like war drums beating a deadly rhythm. Elias's eyes narrowed as he fixed his gaze on the dusty, blood-red trail leading into the open fields. The fog began to lift, revealing the silhouettes of 3 black horses standing sentinel atop a rise, watching with silent, predatory patience. A man in a long coat, broad-shouldered and upright in his saddle, reined in his steed. Even from afar, Elias could see the subtle twitch of his hand, resting on the grip of a revolver. Calm, unwavering, as if human life was just a ledger entry. Clarabelle stepped out onto the porch, her black hair tangled and wild, shadows of rope still marking her face. Her voice cut through the morning air, cold as winter ice. "It's Morrison. He knows we're alive." Her words hung heavy, a warning and a curse. Ruby darted to the window, her face twisting with fury and fear. "I knew it. They won't let us go. That pack of carry-on will tear us apart if they get the chance." Sadi clung tight to Grace's trembling hand, her body trembling like a leaf caught in a storm. Violet stood motionless, her eyes cold and unyielding, like polished stone carved into a shield. Elias studied them all, then slowly rose, his hand reaching for the Winchester. No words needed to be spoken. His eyes told the story. The steel in his gaze was a verdict, a promise of what was to come. The distant thunder of hooves grew louder. First dozens, then hundreds. Riders pouring out from the shadows of the trees, forming a relentless wall of flesh and steel. Torches flickered like fiery specters through the mist, casting jagged shadows as they spread out in a deadly circle around the cabin, wolves closing in on their prey. Grace's voice was a trembling whisper, but her resolve cut through the dawn like a blade. "There's still a way out. You've got a choice." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken danger, a fragile hope amid the encroaching storm. The question lingered. Would they find the courage to fight? Or would the dark tide of Morrison's wrath swallow them whole? The frontier had a way of testing every soul, turning moments of silence into the loudest screams of survival. Under a sky bleeding with dusk, the wild wind carried a haunting question. What price are you willing to pay for what's yours? Elias's voice was a gravelly whisper, heavy with resolve, as he gently shook his head. His calloused hand settled on the stock of his rifle, a silent promise of blood and fire. "I made my choice last night," he said, voice low, like the rumble of distant thunder. "This land is mine now, and it's our fortress against the darkness creeping in." Clarabelle's gaze burned like emerald flames in the dying firelight. She stepped forward, her hand offering an ancient, dull-edged dagger, its blade scarred by time, but her resolve sharper than ever. "If you're with us," she warned, "then understand this. This is no longer about inheritance. It's about war." Outside, a wild, thunderous gallop shattered the night's fragile silence. Dust swirled like restless spirits as the Morrison gang crested the slope, their bloodshot eyes shining through the fog like predators closing in. The old cabin, once a humble refuge, had become a battered fortress. Every breath inside, a gamble against the flames and fury that lurked beyond the door. Darkness fell faster than a lightning strike, swallowing the valley whole, pierced only by the flickering glow of Morrison's torches and the cruel, mocking laughter of his men. Over 20 gunmen stood shoulder to shoulder, their voices echoing like a death knell. their horses snorting and pawing at the earth as if they'd already tasted victory. Inside, Elias checked his Winchester, each round clicking into place with a metallic whisper. His eyes flicked to the 5 women, scarred by ropes and scars, but their gazes blazing with unyielding fire. He handed Ruby an old Colt, slid a sawed-off shotgun into Sadi's trembling hands, tucked a Derringer into Violet's sleeve, and pressed a worn musket into Grace's grip. Clarabelle clutched her navy Colt like a second skin. "We're not just fighting to stay alive," Elias whispered, voice steady as the mountain wind. "We're fighting to end their cruel game, once and for all." Outside, Morrison rode forward, his voice booming through the night. "Hand them over. That cabin's not yours, Ward. Cut them loose yesterday, and you sealed your fate today." Elias stepped onto the battered porch, his voice unwavering, echoing through the cold air. "This land belonged to Jeremiah, and now it's mine. If you want it, you'll have to go through me." Before the words finished, a gunshot shattered the silence. A flash of steel and a crack like thunder. A bullet tore into the wooden gatepost, splintering it into splinters of trembling wood. The wolves of the Morrison gang charged like a flood, teeth bared, claws ripping through the night. Elias ducked back inside, slamming the door shut behind him, the thunder of gunfire erupting into chaos. Windows shattered, screams pierced the air. Ruby's voice rising in a scream of defiance as she fired into the dark, a bullet ripping through a man scrambling onto the porch. Sadi, trembling like a leaf in a storm, shut her eyes tight and pulled the trigger on her shotgun, the blast blowing the door apart and dropping 2 men in a rain of crimson. Violet, hidden in the shadows, struck like a viper, her knife flashing into a raider's throat as he slipped inside, thrashing in shock before going still. Grace yanked Sadi back, then grabbed a jar of kerosene, hurling it through the window, flames roaring up like a vengeful beast, halting the horses' charge cold in their tracks. Morrison barked orders, his men scattering and firing blindly into the inferno. Bullets ripping through walls, thick smoke choking the air, wooden shards flying like deadly shrapnel. Elias dropped low, calm as a mountain stream, working the Winchester's lever with practiced ease, every shot a promise of vengeance in the dark. One shot, one rider tumbling from his saddle in a spray of dirt and shattered silence. Chaos erupted like a prairie storm, fire in Clarabelle's eyes, her hands flashing as she fired 2 quick shots into the smoky haze. The air thickened with gunpowder and burning wood, swirling around her face like a ghostly mask, her emerald gaze blazing with fury and unyielding pride amid the inferno's flickering light. The screams, the thunder of hooves, the crack of rifles, and the desperate cries of horses melded into a savage symphony. Nature's own hell unleashed upon the scorched earth. Jeremiah's old cabin, once a sanctuary, now lay in ruins. A blazing fortress where 1 man and 5 women faced down the chaos, turning fear into their last stand. Smoke billowed high, choking the sky, as the fiery glow from Grace's oil jar cast a blood-red hue over the splintered walls and scattered bodies of horses and fallen riders. Through the haze of smoke and flame, a towering figure emerged. Morrison, tall and imposing, his black coat billowing like a storm cloud, a gleaming silver revolver clenched in his fist. He advanced with slow, deliberate steps, eyes as cold and hard as forged steel, his voice echoing across the battlefield like a church bell tolling judgment. When only a few yards separated him from his enemies, he halted. His voice cut through the chaos, sharp and unyielding. "Ward, you think you've saved them? All you've done is dug a deeper grave for them and for yourself. Around here, law is what I say it is." Elias pushed himself up from the blood-stained porch, his shoulder bleeding from a grazing shot. But his eyes, silver gray and sharp as a blade, burned with defiance. He steadied himself, gripping the heavy Winchester with a quiet resolve as he stepped forward. Behind him, the 5 women stood tall, trembling but unbroken, summoning their last reserves of strength to face the darkness closing in. Clarabelle stepped forward, her gaze locked on Morrison, unwavering. From her coat, she pulled a crumpled stack of papers, documents stained with smoke and desperation. Her voice rang clear and fierce. "You call that law? This is the truth." She waved the papers, their forged debt contracts, fake seals, a list of judges and sheriffs bought and paid for, smoking evidence of Morrison's treachery. Morrison's sneer curled his lips, scorn dripping from his voice. "Paper won't save you when I still hold the gun." Suddenly, from the shadows, Violet stepped into the flickering firelight, clutching a silver locket with trembling hands. Its intricate engravings shimmered in the glow. "Remember this, Morrison?" she whispered, voice trembling with a mixture of pain and resolve. "It belonged to Margaret, your wife." Her eyes flashed with purpose. "She's still alive. And she told us everything. She revealed the truth. How Morrison faked his own death to steal her father's gold mine. How every woman who dared oppose him vanished into the wind." Morrison's face went pale, a flicker of panic passing through his eyes. He snapped back, voice sharp and bitter. "That woman died 5 years ago." Grace stepped forward, her tone as cutting as a blade. "We met her in Denver just 3 weeks ago. She signed a sworn statement, and the marshal has it now. There's nowhere left for you to hide, Morrison." His facade cracked. Fear flickered behind his eyes, only to be swallowed by a raging storm of fury. His jaw clenched. With a roar that shook the ground, he raised his pistol, aiming squarely at Clarabelle. In that instant, time seemed to freeze, every breath held in suspended anticipation. Elias moved instinctively. With a surge of strength, he shoved Clarabelle aside and raised his Winchester. The world exploded into thunder. 2 shots tearing through the air like a lightning strike, ripping apart the silence of the valley. Morrison staggered, a deep bullet wound driving into his shoulder, knocking his gun from his hand. Before he could recover, Ruby stormed forward, her piercing blue eyes blazing with unyielding fire, ready to finish what had begun. "Your time has run out, Morrison. From this moment forward, it's you who will hang for what you've done." Under the flickering flames of the dying fire, Morrison dropped to his knees, hatred blazing in his eyes like a wildfire. Somewhere in the distance, the thunder of hooves echoed again. Only this time, it wasn't his men coming to save him. No, this time it was the marshal's riders, sharpened badges gleaming like silver blades in the moon's pale light. Elias lowered his Winchester, his breath ragged and heavy, knowing deep down that the battle wasn't over yet. But the tide had turned. Morrison was no longer a feared judge. He was just another trembling outlaw, broken and powerless. At last, face to face with the justice he'd long denied himself, he was caught in the cold grip of the law. The moon hung high above, casting a ghostly silver glow across a valley thick with the lingering scent of gunpowder and blood. Morrison was dragged away, his hands bound tight, his twisted face frozen in a mask of rage that no longer had the strength to burn. The few henchmen left standing lowered their heads, unable to meet the steely eyes of Elias or the 5 women they'd once used as warnings, strung up like scarecrows in a ghost town. Marshall Thompson, his silver beard catching the moonlight, stepped forward. His eyes, sharp as a blade, whetted in steel, gave Elias a solemn nod. Then, turning to Grace, Clarabelle, Ruby, Sadie, and Violet, he offered a quiet gesture of respect. Justice may come late, but it always comes. Sometimes, it's just a matter of surviving long enough to see it. You did what no court dared to do. You survived, and you testified. Clarabelle lifted her chin, her black hair falling over the scarred mark on her cheek. Her voice was steady, as firm as the stones in the canyon bed. We didn't survive by luck, she said softly, but with unwavering resolve. We survived because he cut the ropes. All eyes shifted to Elias, standing silent. Blood seeped through his shirt, his face weathered by fire and loss. He said nothing, only bowed his head. He'd never expected to find purpose in a patch of land handed down through inheritance. But now, that cabin, the place he once thought was just a refuge, had transformed. It was no longer a lonely shelter. It had become a fortress of justice, held together by trembling hands that refused to surrender. 3 days later, once the town had settled into quiet again, Elias returned to rebuild the cabin gate. The ropes that once threatened to take lives had turned to ash, nothing but remnants of a past best left behind. Together, he and the 5 women hammered nails, raised walls, each blow echoing their defiance. Piece by piece, they weren't just constructing a house. They were forging a family born in the harshest frontier. Sadie carefully replanted a small garden out front, her hands delicate but fierce with purpose. Ruby took charge of the horses, her fiery gaze watching them run free across the open plains. Violet spent hours sorting through documents, gathering evidence to send to distant courts, proof of what they'd endured. Grace kept the books, her voice steady yet tender, guiding the others like a mother tending her flock. And Clarabelle, always beside Elias each evening, her green eyes catching the last dying light of sunset, a fire that refused to go out. One night, sitting by the fire's glow, Elias looked around at his makeshift family. His voice was rough, like a log splitting in the hearth. Some ropes are made to kill, he said softly. But when you find the courage to cut them, they become the ties that bind us. He paused, voice thick with meaning. I thought I inherited a cabin. But the truth is, I inherited all of you. Silence fell. Only Clarabelle reached out, placing her hand gently on his, her eyes shining brightly in the dark. In that quiet, unspoken moment, they understood. Justice isn't just about laws and courts. Sometimes it's about the bonds forged in fire, the courage to stand when everything else falls apart, and the family built from the ruins of a broken world. And in that quiet moment, Elias saw it clear. This rugged frontier, thick with smoke and shadowed by treachery, is also the land where hope can rise from the ashes of betrayal. It's a place where blood and fire forge bonds that run deeper than gold, where even the darkest night can give way to dawn. The small cabin, bathed in the silver glow of the moon, no longer stands as a monument to Morrison's cruelty. Instead, it rises like a fortress built by those brave enough to face the darkness and refuse to back down. Out here in the West, the land may shift beneath your feet, and guns may change hands with every sunrise. But true justice belongs to those who stand shoulder to shoulder, never turning away from one another in the face of chaos. Sometimes, the greatest treasure we can inherit isn't gold or land, but the chance to become someone better, someone stronger, wiser, more capable of love. I hope your heart carries joy and peace. Always. That's all I ever truly want for you. I love you. Sharing this story with you tonight has been an honor I won't soon forget. Now tell me, what did this tale stir in you? Drop a comment below. Hit the number 1 if it struck a chord. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter from the wild, untamed West.